Hey, everybody, can you hear me? Yep. Excellent, excellent.
Screen test again. And I'll just need you to test your mic out again.
Okay. Can you
When
hear
I
me?
wave at you.
Okay.
Cool.
Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. So I did the same thing, so yours. Nope, that's not what I want. You were in Chrome. Was that where you were?
Was it incognito?
Incognito in Chrome, right?
Yep.
Okay,
That's the one. This one.
cool.
I'll full screen it and then I'll plug it in.
Great. All right. Oh, yeah, the second one, that side, second one back. Or,
Going back, that's all.
of the two display ports.
The one that's closer to me.
Yeah, the one that is the one I use.
All right.
All right.
All right. Hello, everyone. So, tonight we're going to be speaking about data processing with Zeppelin, Solr, Spark, and Nifi. Eric Pugh, Principal Open Source Connections, is here. He's going to talk to us. So the organizer is usually Raul. However, he's in Atlanta, so I'm emceeing for the evening. My name's Arturas. You're kind of our co-organizer. You help, spread the word about this meetup, invite your friends. If you know of any sponsors, please refer them to us. Our emails are both here. If you want to contact us or have any questions, please go ahead. Data Wranglers is part of the greater data community in DC, which is made up of all these different groups. Check them out. Each and one of them have something different to offer that relates to data science and data field in general. So, what do we cover here? Well, essentially, we cover the 90% of all data projects, getting data into a format suitable for analysis. Without us, nothing really happens. Quickly, take 30 seconds to 1 minute and introduce yourself to someone you don't know. And yeah, meet two people you haven't met yet. Go ahead. All right. Hopefully we can get this conversation going afterwards at the end, but 30-second intros are done. MS in Business Analytics.
Save next slide or screen save and kick?
No, one of our slides skipped. Okay. So the group rules here are, if you have a question, please go ahead and ask it. Be polite and courteous to others, and share what you know with us. At the end of the day, we each are here, specialists in our field, and there's plenty of knowledge that can go around. Huge thank you to one of our venue sponsors, GW University, gracious enough to let us host our event here. Thank you to our program sponsors. And also a big thank you to our organizational sponsors. Does anyone have any 15-second announcements as they relate to jobs, meetups, hackathons, conferences, or classes? Anyone have any job postings? Anyone looking for a job? Anyone want to promote their meetup? Anybody want free pizza? No. Do you have something? Oh, okay, never mind. All right, no announcements today. So upcoming DWDC meetups, obviously today. This weekend also, one of our program sponsors, Raul, and his company Anant, is having a workshop on Docker. If you want to register, you can just go at this link here. I think there's like 9 tickets left, but if you're interested in better ways to ship code, take a look. We're still looking for speakers for January and February, and we'll keep you up to date. If you have any ideas, feel free to, shoot an email at us. So tonight, we'll be speaking about data processing with, Eric will be speaking about data processing with Zeppelin, Solr, Spark, and Nifi. Eric has been heavily involved in the open source world as a developer, committer, and user for the past 10 years. He is a member of the Apache Solr Foundation, and lately has been mulling over how we move our expectations for search from 10 blue links to remarkably right. In biotech, financial services, and defense IT, he has helped European and American companies develop coherent strategies for embracing open source software. As a speaker, he has advocated the advantages of agile practices in software development. He has been involved in Solr since 2007 when he submitted Solr 284, the patch for parsing rich documents such as PDF and MS Office, which subsequently became the single most popular patch as measured by community votes. The patch was subsequently cleaned up and enhanced by 3 other individuals, demonstrating the power of the free open source model to build great code collaboratively. Solr 284 was eventually refactored into Solr Cell as part of Solr version 1.4. Eric also co-authored the first book on Solr called Solr Enterprise Search Server. And without further ado, please welcome Eric Pugh.
All right, thank you very much, Arturus. Appreciate it. So, before we get too deep into this, I have a slight confession to make. Let me find my slides and then I'll go ahead and fess up. So, let's see. Is that coming through? Right? So, so the starring role of Apache Nifi did not come together for me for tonight. So I've given this talk now 5 times. This will be my 5th time. And I'm currently batting 3 successes, 1 disaster, and 1 okay. Okay? I'm hoping this gets to be my 4th success. So what I'm going to do tonight is show a lot of live code. And for anyone who's done speaking, you know that live coding is a bad idea to do in front of an audience, right? And I'm having mixed success in my earlier practice run today. So we'll just go ahead and see it. Expect to see some nasty Scala error from a Spark job that is completely impenetrable. And yeah, I have no idea what the fix is. So so this will be a little bit rougher than I might like to be. As Arturus kind of said, don't need to do the marketing thing, but I run a company that does lots and lots of search stuff. Open source connections. We do lots around relevancy. We do lots around Solr, Elasticsearch, Cassandra, some of the other big data platforms. And we're really excited that my colleague Doug Turnbull's book, Relevant Search, it's actually no longer under the Manning Early Access Program. It's actually a real book, and there's a discount code if anyone wants to go take it. Relevant Search is sort of our manifesto of what we've been doing for the last couple of years in trying to tune search engines to return really great results, right? And so we kind of distilled that all out in that book. What we're the great thing about search is there's these great open source solutions out there that make it really easy for anybody to have a search engine. The bad thing about that is anybody can have a search engine and most of them suck. So relevant search is our attempt to kind of give out recipes and ideas and methodology around how to take your search engine and make it return what you're looking for. So the other thing that we're really excited, we've been doing all year now, we're just coming up on our 1-year anniversary, is a podcast called Search Disco. So please check it out. It's on iTunes, it's the other usual places. While it focuses mostly on search, it's a pretty broad subject matter. There's some talks about Kubernetes and Google Compute Platform. I think we did a talk on Docker. There's a bunch of sort of, an argument about AngularJS and TypeScript and where is it going to go. So just kind of a pretty broad set of topics, but it's everything that we kind of run into in doing search projects. So, yeah, as kind of Artur sort of said, I'm here to answer your questions, right? So before I get too forward, right, I'm in this great big room. It's a little intimidating. I didn't expect this big fancy room, and you all are way back there. So I'm hoping you're going to ask me questions. So before I get too much farther into this, how many people already know what Spark is? And you've had 33 yes, exactly, right? So, I don't think I need to go do the intro topic, right? How many people already know what Solr is? And yeah, awesome. Feel free to ask me those questions because that's my sweet spot and that's where I'm most comfortable, right? So if this ends up being a talk on what can I do with Solr and data analytics and data processing, feel free to bring that up. So really happy to talk about that. And then how many people here are familiar already with Apache Zeppelin and sort of these data notebooks? How about IPython Notebook and Jupyter? Yeah, okay, all right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about basically what I've been learning in using Zeppelin. And I'm going to show you some code, show you some examples, and we can kind of talk through that. And we'll just see how it goes, okay? So please feel free to ask me questions. I will try and make sure that I don't go past 8 o'clock, although I'm happy to talk afterwards about whatever. And let's see what happens. So Spark you guys already know about, right? And we're doing lots of good stuff with that. It's MapReduce 2.0. For me personally, the whole MapReduce just never made sense. It was so level and so low level, so complex, very difficult to take my data processing problems and convert them to a MapReduce job. It never really resonated. For me, Spark has been a much simpler platform to work with, and I think that as Spark becomes more popular, I think it could become the next SQL, right? With the same sort of legs and duration over the next 20 years that SQL has kind of had for the last 20 years. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Obviously, I'm a Solr guy, although feel free to ask me about Elasticsearch as well, but my heart is definitely with Solr. It's a really common search engine, lots of big data platforms bundle it in there. Very powerful tool for asking questions of your information. Docker. How many people know about Docker? Right, everybody knows about Docker. How many people are actually using Docker? Okay, a couple of you. Well, you're going to get to see me using Docker, and you're going to hear me curse Docker because it's not perfect. But it is pretty amazing. And I'm not going to talk much about, I'm not going to focus on it at all. But I'm going to use it. If you guys have questions about Docker, I'm happy to talk about that afterwards. Or you want to sign up for the workshop that Artur's colleague is running and get deeper. So. All right, so Apache Zeppelin, not just a really cool logo, it's the current open source project that I'm kind of having a crush on this year. So for everybody here who is really familiar with IPython Notebook, it's the same thing, only more opinionated and written in Java, where Spark is a first-class citizen. I think of it as, your IPython Notebook, Jupyter for your big data sets. It's designed to give you a simple web interface and I won't keep talking much, I'll just switch over and show it to you, but a simple web interface for interacting with all of those different repositories that are out there of our information, right? It used to be that everything was in a JDBC, in a relational database, right? And then we started throwing other systems like an HBase or other systems for storing data. And now we have many different systems. We have something, we have Neo4j for graph. We have Cassandra for columnar data store. We got MongoDB. We have Elasticsearch. We have Solr. There's lots of different systems out there. And it can be very difficult for someone who wants to mess around with that information, wants to interact with that information to really gain access to that, right? So that's why we have products like Tableau. I don't know that does those. I mean, it's still SQL oriented, but we have some of the commercial products out there that allow people getting access. But what I often see is that the people who want to mess around with the data kind of have to ask for an extract from the underlying system and bring it local and then mess it around and then look at the information, and that's a pretty inefficient process. The idea behind Zeppelin is that you're going to be able to interact with your data directly. So two things of bookkeeping. I'm going to post on the meetup at the end of this a link to the slides. Those are the slides, so they're not very important. But maybe more importantly is a link to the gist, right, that has all of the commands that I'm going to execute, okay? So if you want to follow along at home, through the magic of Docker, you'll be able to follow the same set of commands. So let's see how it goes. So, yes, let me get this, and I may be restarting something very quickly. Yeah, I'm just going to restart that because that's not working for me. So real quick, what I'm doing is Docker lets me run virtual machines, and so on my local laptop, I am running 2 Solr nodes, a Zookeeper node, and I'm about to restart my Zeppelin. So give me a second to bring that up. Wow, that is very little. Tell me when you can see. Okay, is that big enough? All right, excellent, excellent, excellent. So, and then let me go get my notes to myself. That's pretty little as well. All right, we're getting there, we're getting there. So the magic of Docker, real quickly, is I can stand up a completely packaged environment by running that command. And, nope, sorry, let's try that, Zeppelin version 7. One more command, sorry, this is where I didn't practice enough. 1 second. Here we go. All right, getting rid of it. One more try. Here we go. And in a couple of minutes, we'll see. It'll render itself right there. That is very little, but we'll see a web preview. We'll see the home page. So what I'm doing right now is somebody has very nicely packaged up a copy of Zeppelin, which is a fairly simple web app, along with a Spark environment and all the related jars and software to kind of give me a quick little playground, right? So I'll post the gist, you can run it as well, and we should have this up in just a moment. Here we go. So this is the home page for Zeppelin. Let's see if I can't make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of plunge right into what Zeppelin is. and kind of walk you through what Zeppelin is. So the idea behind all of these notebook tools, right, is that I have some sort of interface to something else. So an IPython notebook, I get to call Python, or I can call R, or other libraries that are in my local environment, right? And so in the same way, in my Zeppelin, right, it lets me write code through this little web interface that lets me write my Spark jobs, okay? So, for all of you, for everybody who's, played around with Spark, this should look fairly simple, right? I am importing some dependencies. I am going out onto Amazon and grabbing some bank data, right? Going ahead and creating a class with a bunch of variables and loading my data. And I'm registering it as a temp table called a bank, right? And I'll go ahead and I'll run this and we'll see, hopefully it'll all run and I don't have any errors. And so what's happening right now is through my web interface, I am submitting that Spark job out to my cluster and running it. And the first time it takes quite a while to run, but eventually it'll return, right? Fingers crossed. Give it another second. So, I'm doing everything on my local laptop, right? But if you think that in most environments where we have lots of different data repositories, lots of different systems, right, then I'm able, from no matter where I am, connect to my Zeppelin server and start working with my data, right? I don't have to install anything in my local laptop. I don't have to run, get all of the dependencies and everything else. Someone can kind of configure my Zeppelin environment and I just log on to it, okay? So right here, I can see it's starting to run, right? So it's putting out the output right there. And this always makes me nervous that it's not going to work. And it finished. So I just went out onto the internet, grabbed a file, downloaded it in the Spark environment, parsed it, and created some objects. And now I can ask some questions. Now, one of the beauty of Spark is that SQL is a first-class citizen in the Spark world, right? So for everybody who is familiar with SQL, and as a search guy, I thought I left SQL behind like 10 years ago, and now I'm back doing lots of SQL, I can run my SQL queries. It's going to take a second the first time, and my laptop is sweating. Oh, there we go, running, right? Get my feedback, and there's my output, right? So here is some nice charting, some nice results. And what's nice about Zeppelin is it gives you some basic ways of putting in parameters. So here is that same query, only I've said max age 35, right? Why don't I go ahead and change that down to 25? Rerun my query, and there's my results, right, 0 through 25, right? This is a really powerful interface for getting data out to people who can ask questions sort of on an ad hoc basis, right? And as you can see, here we go, we got our couple of little interfaces. So, here I've got an option where I'm looking at, marital status data, right? Pick my parameters, it reruns the query, and there are my results. So this is sort of, in a nutshell, or in the most simplistic concept, kind of what these data notebooks look like. Now, what's interesting about these is I can do things like, let's say this is a report that I want to share with someone. A little small there for you to see, right? But I can take each one of those little notebooks, right, and it's just a URL. And so I can give that to somebody else, right? And I may be giving it to someone who probably shouldn't be monkeying around with my SQL query or messing around with the guts of it, right? And so I can, provide them sort of play with these three properties, right? So, kind of questions? Pretty straightforward, everybody sort of seen these things? Is this kind of trite and we're, or is it, yeah, please.
Can you embed that as well?
Yeah, with an iframe. I mean, so yes, there's many ways of embedding these, right? Like an iframe is the really easy way. There are some sort of plugins to grab this and do that. Different people build products that embed Zeppelin and make that kind of happen, right? But yeah, you definitely could build your quick little dashboard out of this, right? And you can there's a lot of things that you can do with these dashboards. You can share them in different ways. They're adding in lots of, let's see, what did I want to show you? Yeah, here we go. So I'm on the default view. There's sort of a simple view that I can provide to people, right? Let's see, did I just lose my? Right? I can provide this whole page in sort of a report view like this, right, that I can give to somebody so that they don't see the underlying parameters, right? So there's a couple of different ways. Now, I think if you're a Tableau user, right, you probably look at this like, wow, that's pretty limited, right? But I've worked with plenty of people using IPython Notebook and some other things where it's very difficult to see what they're seeing, right? And so I really like sort of the ability to take a URL and share it. Some of the other exciting things that are going on in the Zeppelin community are a lot of interesting ideas around doing things like, how do I get that back to default? They're layering in, like you can layer in all the things that sort of an enterprise might want, right? Which is sort of like permissions, version control, right? So if you use, it's interesting, this feature here is very tied to Git. If you use Git, you can check in and out through this interface, notebooks, and share them with people. And then one of the things that I'm really excited about, I'm going to just Google for it, is a site. Let's see if I make this a little bit bigger. A site called Zeppelin Hub, where I could take my data notebook and upload it to Zeppelin Hub with all my data, and then share that with other people, and they can take my notebook, the instructions, and download it and run it in their local Zeppelin environment. So think of sort of like a GitHub for Zeppelin notebooks is kind of what they're doing in here. So yeah, that's sort of Zeppelin in a quick nutshell. So let me actually show you doing something, right? And let's see how it goes, okay? So there's so the last two things I'll just run by, right? So Zeppelin used to be its primary interface is through Spark, right? Like that's how you interface with all the various data sets. However, and I don't have it running in this local build, they're doing a lot around other data science toolkits for data processing. So being able to, here's sort of an example, being able to bring in, like, run Python scripts, right? And these were some of the things that people were saying, hey, I'm already using Python, I'm already really invested in it, I'm not using Spark, and I really like my IPython notebook, but I'm looking for something better. And so they've been doing a lot of interesting stuff around supporting Python and, Matplotlib as a specific tool, right? And these are sort of examples that are in here. The other stuff that I'm pretty excited about is R, right? Are there a lot of R users in here? Okay, yeah, right. R obviously is a very, very popular option, right? And so here you can see, right, I can run my R scripts inside of Zeppelin, okay? So they're getting, it used to very much be like the world we looked through very Spark-centric view. Now it seems like they're broadening it to support more different sort of data processing languages. The last one that is getting some interesting stuff is Mahou Right, which is a kind of long in the tooth at this point, the oldie but goodie original Java machine learning framework, right? But there's a lot of new stuff going on with Mahou, right, in processing data, and so Zeppelin is supporting that now. So that's kind of what they're doing. The other sort of maybe thing to show is they're adding in a lot of interesting features around monitoring all these jobs, right? Because again, we're running in a clustered environment, and you don't know where all the things are. So they're trying to make it simpler for people to understand why a job had a problem, or why my Spark job failed, or what connection or network connection failed. That's been in the most recent version of Zeppelin, and that's pretty cool. And then the other area that there's been a lot of work is what they call these different interpreters, right? So the interpreters are all the different languages that you can interact with your data. So I'm going to show you an interpreter called %JDBC, right? These are sort of all the different query languages that are exposed to me. So I can talk to an HBase server. I can talk to an Elasticsearch server, JDBC, Postgres. I can run a shell script and look at what's on the local, run shell scripts on the local Zeppelin web server. Obviously Spark, and then there's Spark. So the idea here is that you can have all these different interpreters that allow you access to the different data sources that you want. You can query them and get them back. So let me go ahead and run you through actually doing that with one of them. All right, so what I have done is started up a local, look at all those errors. I have started up a local Solr cloud environment. I have the standard tech products that many of you have ever played with Solr. It's the default data set, right? And I am running that right here. So Solr/product/select (query equals), just so you can see that I have 32 documents in my cluster, okay? And the thing is, often when I'm working with a Solr index that I don't know very well, right, I'll want to interact with that information, I'll want to share it, I'll want to look at it, right? Often I'll use Solr directly because that's the tool that I know, and that works. But if I want to share results to somebody, or want to give someone else like a way of playing with parameters, right, and doing queries, doing it directly through Solr and saying, yeah, go to this URL, look at this big XML or JSON blob, isn't very productive, right? They're like, oh, wait, what am I looking at, right? They get hung up on the format of the data versus the data itself. So wouldn't it be nice if people could access this through a way that they're more comfortable with, like SQL, right? Well, one of the things I'm really excited about in Solr 6 is what they call a streaming API, right? We're all adding streaming to everything, right? Everything gets streaming now. So there's now a streaming API in Solr, so I can query Solr and stream back all my documents. Well, built on top of that is a SQL interface. So I can send a SQL query to Solr instead of a search query. So let me go ahead and find my SQL query. And we'll just do it sort of in the most simplistic format first. Can everybody read that SQL query? All right, pretty standard SQL query. It's select the manufacturer ID, count, comma, 1. From tech products and group by the manufacturer ID, right? So I want to know how many products were made by each manufacturer in my data set, right? That's a pretty simple thing. So there is my query that I'm sending it to. and there's my query back, right? Most of my products, I only have one per manufacturer, but Canon has 2 and Corsair has 3, okay? So that's like the raw interface that Solr is giving me back my SQL. But again, that's cool. I can now do SQL queries against Solr, but my output is this streaming API. It's, again, pretty raw, right? So let's see if Zeppelin can help me out. So step 1, I need to tell Zeppelin about Solr, right? Like Zeppelin doesn't know anything about Solr. It doesn't know about the Solr API, right? Fortunately, and that's a big part of what Zeppelin offers, is a very standardized way of augmenting it with additional functionality. So let me go ahead and dig up my Zeppelin. 81, okay. So I need to tell my interpreter, I'm going to go to the JDBC interpreter, right? I need to tell my interpreter that I want, did I already do it? No, I didn't. That I want to add the SolrJ client library, right? Now what's nice is because I'm following the sort of pretty standardized Maven group artifact version style, it will go out to the Maven repository and download all the dependencies I need, including all the dependencies that this client library needs as well, right? So that means that it gets a lot easier to add new function into Zeppelin. And Zeppelin has spent a ton of effort and energy dealing with process isolation and how do I make sure that if I need 2 versions of the same jar, one for JDBC and one for Spark, that they don't stomp on each other, right? They spend a lot of effort making that all work. And it does work mostly. So I'm going to go ahead and I just have to cut and paste all of these. Techproducts.driver. Have all of you kind of gone through and seen this and done this sort of setup to add a new JDBC endpoint? Oh. Now, one interesting thing is I need the internal IP address of my Solr, which is these 2 magical things. Okay, well, that is what it is. So, all right. Okay, it's that. And I don't have a username and I don't have a password. Okay. All right, fingers crossed. So what it's going to do is say, okay, I've got a new interpreter, update me with all the new settings, right? So right now Zeppelin is going out to the internet and downloading all the dependencies, right? And it will give me an error message if it doesn't, if it runs into problems, and occasionally it does. But theoretically now I'm ready to make a JDBC query against my Solr. So let me go ahead and create a new note. Solr Tech Products Playground. I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I know this entire notebook. So those are my default interpreters, right? So I can speak Spark. I can speak Markdown. It'll just render Markdown. That's how a lot of the messaging happens. I can speak Angular, JS. So if I want to build some custom componentry in the GUI, right, I can paste in Angular code and do things, right? And then all the rest. So I'm going to go ahead and say JDBC. So I've gone ahead and there is my notebook. And I'm going to do that exact same query only this time I'm going to, against my Solr. All right, and now we wait. And we'll see what happens. Hey, look at that, right? So there it is, right? A beautiful table view of some data that's inside of Solr, right? So that's pretty cool. So what can I do with my data, though, now that I have it in here, right? Because remember, a lot of these data notebooks are about telling a story, right? What is the story that you want to tell about that information? What is the important information when I look at this, right? So a table isn't enough, right? Plus, I only get 300 rows worth of data. Well, what's interesting about Zeppelin is it tries to bring a lot of best practices for data visualization to a product, right? So versus maybe IPython Notebook, which obviously Zeppelin stands on the shoulders of and rips off shamelessly, I always felt there where I had to figure it all out myself. There was no charting library built in. I had to go get my charting library, right? There wasn't sort of standardized these are the bar chart, pie chart, area chart, line chart, scatter chart that were available, right? Whereas this gives me, kind of built-in sort of visualizations, right, that look decent, right? Not the best, but decent. So let me go back into my little bar chart. That's what I selected. So there, that's interesting. All right, I can look here and see, Corsair has 3. All right, that's sort of interesting. What can I do with this? Come on, where's my GUI? I don't know. Let's see. All right, well, these are the fields that I have available to me in my SQL query, right? So Zeppelin is being smart about my SQL query and doing some things. So I can do things like, this isn't going to be very exciting. Right now I'm summing, right, the counts. Maybe I do min. Let's see what happens. I'm not sure why it should be dynamically reloading right there. Let's try that again. Okay, well there you can see count wasn't very interesting. Let's see if we can do something a little more interesting, and let me go check my cheat sheet. Keys, okay. Why don't I grab the count, be the keys. I'm gonna group by my manufacturer ID. And then sum. I'm not sure why I seem to I don't know how to get off my highlighting, which I seem to put on. But that's a little bit, there we go. That's more interesting, right? Now all of a sudden it's visually organizing the data for me where I can see, hey, there's a whole bunch of these ones, there's 2 over here. I think that looks a lot more interesting, right? Now I have a nice frequency diagram built really quickly that shows me that the vast majority of my manufacturers only have 1 product, some have 2, and then only 1 has 3, right? And I can take this pretty little visualization that I've built, right? And I can go here, and there's a URL that I can provide around and give it to other people, okay? So that's sort of the story behind Zeppelin, is that it's relatively easy to get in there, make a query, bring back some data, right? And share that with people. Questions at this point? Yeah.
So, we take the enterprise, if the data sitting in the Hadoop clusters, and there are users who are more SQL jockeys, and you want to give them a UI, like a rapid SQL or something like that, so that they can interact with the high tables. Example, for example, the high views are having issues and stuff like that. So, is this a good tool for analytics at scale?
Yes, that's its kind of core, right? So So what I showed you, right, was just going through the JDBC processor, right? And so honestly, it's only as fast as like a JDBC interface. So great if I'm doing SQL queries against, you know, a MySQL or something, but you know, what's happening here is we're taking this query and we're sending it to wherever it gets run there, and then all that's coming back to Zeppelin are the results, right? So this sort of JDBC thing is really cool and interesting, but you know, that wouldn't be the right way to do scale. So to do scale, right, that's why Spark is sort of the first-class citizen in here, right? So, so I can either, well, let me see if let me create just a real quick note. I don't have HBase in here. But just to, I can never remember if it's info or help, right? But that wasn't. And I'm just guessing that there's an interpreter called help. Is that what it was called? Interpreter Hive, not found. Just want to make sure I'm not. Yep. Now you're watching me demo or try to figure this out in front of you, which is not a good use. All right, that's not a good use of your time. So yeah, what I wanted to say is, so there's different interpreters, right, in here. So you can grab, yeah, Elasticsearch right there, HBase, right? We can grab, you can use that HBase, right, to talk directly to the HBase cluster, right? So it's gonna just do a query to the HBase cluster like any other Java client, right? So it's either as fast or as slow as any other Java client. And that's the same model that the JDBC one uses, or the Cassandra, or the Elasticsearch. If what you want to do is data processing at scale, that is why you have the Spark environment, right? So let me go ahead and just show you like a little Spark job, right? I'll cut and paste it, and you can kind of think of it, it's sort of very similar. So when I got started with this, I thought I would make a JDBC query here and an Elasticsearch query here using those two interpreters and then merge the data, right? But then I'd be bringing all those data sets back to Zeppelin, which is a lightweight web app, right? That's not a data processing. It's fine for visualization. Take my query, send it out, get the aggregate roll up back, display that in the screen. But for data processing, that's why Spark is so important. So, let's see. So let me just show you. We'll make one real quick. So. Give me 1 second to make sure. So where? Okay. Now I remember. All right, so this is Zeppelin 7, which is new, incubating, latest trunk that I'm using, and guess what? Not everything worked. That was my panic this afternoon around 4 o'clock, where I was like, hey, I ought to go double check that everything is working. And yeah, it was not working. So fortunately, I have, we'll make it bigger. This is also, through the magic of Docker, I am running an older version of Zeppelin on my laptop. So, so the one you were just talking about, ooh, please don't give me that. Broken pipe. See, this is where I hate Zeppelin or all this stack, is when I get random error that is probably because I'm running too much on my laptop and it tanked. So what am I going to do? I'm gonna go back and walk you through that original demo that they shipped. So. So if you look at this code again, right, that kind of briefly whizzed through, right? If I'm doing data processing and I need to do it at scale, right, that's what Spark is for, right? Like I build my job, I deploy it on the cluster, I've got 10, 20, 30, however much resources I need, right? And I happen to be running it all on my laptop, but obviously that's not production. So the magic here is you would have your person who really understands those data structures in Hive or in HBase, right, and understands what all the views and everything else. What they would do is build one of these little bits of script, right, and it's scripting at this point, right, it's not really coding, it's scripting, right, and you would build this script here, and at the end of it, it puts into the Spark environment a temp table, right, registered temp table called bank in this particular example, right? And that is something that the right people with the right skills go ahead and put together. And then you talked about your sort of SQL folks, right, who want to do this at scale, right? Well, that's what all of this here is I am running those SQL queries, but I'm running those SQL queries through Spark SQL in the Spark environment across my full data set, right? And so you're gonna take whatever your raw data structures look like and make a couple of tables, right? Which is what the SQL people will end up using. And you can do your joins and you can manipulate that data, however you want. A good example of this, right? And maybe this should have been my backup. We had an intern for the summer who was looking at genomics data. And she was definitely on the science end, not on the data end of data scientist. She didn't know, she showed up and she must have been really good at selling me for her internship. She was amazing because she didn't know anything, like didn't know SQL, right? It was like, oh wow, how are you gonna manipulate this data? You really understand math and science, but the tools that we use wasn't there, right? And so what we ended up doing was they had this data that was in a nasty Oracle table, right? That had all these joins and everything else, right? And it wasn't a good use of her time to try and figure out how to chase all the joins and run that underlying data structure. So what we did is we used Zeppelin. We made we added the Oracle driver to our Spark environment, and I wrote a little bit of code, kind of looking like this, to go out to the various tables that were out there in Oracle, bring them back, put a couple of joins in, make a new table out of that. That was the level of sort of the joins and everything that she needed in order to actually go do sort of this sort of hardcore science work on genomic data that she was doing, right? And that's maybe a little bit analogous to what you were asking me, is what happens where. So, okay. So, other questions? Please. Yeah, so by default, it's using the Maven Central, right? But this is one of the things, configuration, somewhere in here. Nope, that's a notebook repository. I'm not finding where it is. I know where it is in the older interface. You can add your own repositories, right? So if you have your local repositories, right? Now I'm not finding it on this screen. You can go out and add your own repositories. So you can either add code via the Maven, go out and download it, or you can upload a jar file to Zeppelin and then load it that way, right? I can, let me show you. I think I can grab any of these, like so this one here. So I've said go out there, but I can also do /user Zeppelin, oh, thank you, my custom jar, right? And that's how you add. So like one thing I've noticed is if I start creating Zeppelin scripts, right, the little notebooks that start looking really long, right, with a lot of code, I'll typically realize that now I'm writing software, not writing scripts, and I will package those Spark jobs up or make, say, okay, how do I make that reusable, and just add that to my Spark environment, so that I'm not building these big long scripts inside of Zeppelin. So the demo I wanted to show, and it's not going to work because I'm having that error. Let's see. I tried to run that. I can restart and bring it up, but it is loading taxi data, processing it, and then writing it back out to Solr from inside of here. I do not know quite what this big nasty looking error is, so that I'm having. So I'm not sure I want to try and debug that in front of you. I will run through my gist one more time and then share that with you guys. So bad. Yeah.
In terms of more complex visualization of statistical functions, are there libraries, for example, if you want to do box plot or scatter?
Right. So that is, I think, a lot of why they, and I haven't really messed with it. Wait, where is my documentation? Zeppelin. That's why these down here are being added, is for those more sophisticated ones, right? Now, people are building their own plugins, right? Like I've seen some interesting geo plugins that are being committed right now, right? To do leaflet.js and build a map of the country or the world and look at your heat maps and stuff like that. Those, though, are a relatively significant amount of work, right? Because you're kind of building your own custom Zeppelin plugins, right? And therefore you're responsible for maintaining them and everything else. Whereas I think what you're asking for is already in our Matplotlib, some of these other tools, right? And they run in the local server that Zeppelin is running on, and you get great images, and that works perfectly fine, right? You're not going to get your scaling that doing it at Spark and all of that would give you, but I think that's where you're getting your more rich visualizations. So Zeppelin graduated the Apache Incubator program this past spring. Can't quite remember, right? And their 060 release was the first one after graduation. Graduating the incubator program sort of means that a project at Apache has enough stakeholders. It's not run by one firm, it's got to run by many firms. Enough stakeholders, enough committers, enough people mentoring new people, enough traffic to be sort of hey, this has a very good chance of becoming a widely deployed industry standard product. It's really good to see my friend Jim here, right? I thought, the first time I saw one of the things I thought made Zeppelin was when Hortonworks said, hey, yeah, we're bundling Zeppelin in, and we're going to do all the security integration and everything else, right? I've seen a company, two companies that have taken Zeppelin, and they had a big suite of software, but they didn't have a data notebook, and they just kind of bundled Zeppelin in and made their own interpreters. They interacted with their data set, right? So it's not clear yet whether the vast majority of people who are contributing to Zeppelin are doing it because they want to replace Tableau or IPython Notebook as a standalone product, or whether it's a great platform and framework to roll into your product and provide your own sort of data analytics notebook through your product, right? I've seen both, So that's about it for me. It's 8 o'clock. I really appreciate everybody's time. Oh, you got it. Yep.
Just want to ask, maybe I missed, did you cover Nifi or?
No, I'm not touching it because it didn't work. Yeah, I got close, but I realized I had too much. So I keep winnowing this talk down because otherwise it ends up being a 2-hour and now look, we're making a SQL query against a MySQL database, and so I'm winnowing it down. So next time, Nifi. So, yeah. So. All right, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. If you have questions, etc., please hit me up after your talk. Thank you very much. So,
I think some of us might go to Tonic right next here, grab a drink or two, network. We'll hang around here too for a bit if you want to ask questions. I'm sure you might have many for Eric. But yeah, thank you for coming out, and there's still some pizza left out there. It might be cold, but, you can have some. Thanks.